greatest show in fantasy football history, hosted by the incomparable Scott Connor and the one and only RayG. I present to you Destination Chill, where football and fantasy collide.
GEGP, what's going down, good people? It is Sunday, June 2nd, 2024. This is Destination Chill. I know it is your boy RayG, joined as always by my man, my brother from another mother, Scott Connor. You can find him at Charles Chill, FFB Scott. Hey, I just want to tell everybody right now, that it is going down outside in Dallas, Texas. The weather is wild, damn tornado watches, severe thunderstorm warnings. Scott, I could do a lot of things through the good Lord who strengthens me, but I cannot control the weather, my friend. I have no control over the weather. So if the power goes out, the stream goes off, we promise you we will do this again. But I think we should be all right through this thing, Scott. So I got a lot of stuff that I want to talk to you about, but I don't want to play around. I don't want to waste time. And we're actually going to go another 30 minutes tonight because it's time. We've played around for the past couple of shows. We've done drafts and had some fun. But I want to have a conversation about some things. I really want to talk fantasy football, dynasty space. So I think it's time for us to have one of them real talk conversations. I think people enjoy that. How you doing tonight? And you good with that, baby?
I'm good, and hopefully the weather cooperates so that we can get in a full 90 minutes tonight of just dynasty talk. The last couple shows we've done Underdog. We've both been doing a lot of Underdog. It feels like I don't know why I'm a glutton for punishment, but I said, I need some super flex action, so let me jump into 10 of these FFPC best balls, which, of course, I text you, and then you start jumping into them, and it's on the clock 24/7, 365 for like the last month. I think I'm only on the clock in like 4 drafts right now, which is like low compared to what it's been for the last couple weeks. But we've done a lot of Underdog, a lot of best ball. I want to get back to some real like dynasty theory, future predictions, all the stuff that we really chop it up during the day in Heisman chat. Like these are the conversations we have where we're going deep. So that's what tonight's going to be. So I'm excited for it.
Yeah, and I just want to say, Didi had a birthday this week, man. 5 years in the game. And I just want to thank everybody that's tapped in, rocked with us now, rocked with us before, that's shown love to the platform to see this thing grow. And Scott, to know some of the things that are coming down the line, it's just really cool to see. And I just want to tell you, my friend, that I appreciate you believing in the brand, believing in me, and everything that you've done to help grow this thing. And I can't wait to see where the next 5, where we take it, man. So I appreciate you, Scott.
Yeah, right back at you. I mean, I gave you the congrats on Twitter, but it's just awesome because you and I had a conversation, not to go too far into the weeds on this, but we had a conversation right when you started DD. And I came to you and I was like, you know what? I'm kind of thinking of starting my own thing. And you gave me some real general advice about, content ownership and making sure like what you do, you protect it, you protect your time and all that kind of stuff. And here we are, middle of June, 2024. Doing our own show together, which we've been going on for almost a year. So let's get into the dynasty stuff. I'm ready.
All right, baby, let's go. I'm going to start this out. I'm going to start out, okay? I'll start out first. And for everybody out there, we did not tell each other what we were going to bring to the table because we wanted an authentic reaction. We want to have a real conversation, and we want y'all to engage. So in the comments, let us know. Give us your side, your opinion, your feedback. That will help generate the conversation, Scott. But let's talk about, I want to ask you, man, I told you the other day, we were having a conversation. I don't know if it was in the Heisman chat or if you and I were just texting back and forth. But I said it feels like the dynasty game, at least from what I've seen from whenever I came into it, like as a content creator around that 2018 era, it feels like it's cyclical, man. Feels like it makes this loop. Feels like there was a point in time where everything was the way that you approach the players. There was nothing about roster construction to the degree that it is now. It was player takes, people telling you who's good, who's bad. This is who you need to take, and this is the good player. So draft that player, invest in that player, build with that player. And then I vividly remember when the early analytics era started to come along, and people were really looking at breakout age and dominator rating. Those were the big driving factors and decisions that were made in Dynasty. And then it got back into, it kind of morphed into you're seeing a lot of stuff now where it's back to on-field play and who's better, what situation is better, because the NFL game has changed. I'm just, what have you seen, man? What have you seen from when you started to how we as fantasy football players go about trying to win? Because that's what we're trying to do. Regardless of how you get there, you're trying to win, whether it's in a dynasty league, a redraft league, just the process of selecting the player. How has that changed in your opinion? And I mean, we can get into where it's going to go, but I just want to know from you, how much has that changed and how much has that changed Dynasty?
Yeah, when I first started, my first 3 or 4 years of Dynasty were all just player takes. It was finding the few voices out there that were actually talking about players. Really, it wasn't even about the Dynasty game, how to win a Dynasty league, how to build a Dynasty team. It was just, okay, yeah, we have a Dynasty podcast and we're going to talk players. There was no conversation really about team building, about roster construction, none of that. Then, like you said, the player take started to morph into, okay, we have the film versus the analytics crowd. I remember being at Dynasty Command Center back in 2018 with Ryan McDowell and Curtis Patrick.
Yep.
And at the time, Travis May was on the staff. Everyone knows Travis May. He's been with a lot of different places. But he was the first person that really I didn't know. Because, Ray, you know, when you first started, I could give you the name of a podcaster or an analyst, and you would be able to tell me, is that a film guy or an analytics guy, right?
Yeah.
You'd be able to just know based on listening to them talk,
Yes.
listening to see what they say about players, you would know. And Travis was the first person that I thought for the longest time, 6 months of me knowing him, I thought he was a film guy. I thought he was a football guy, a film guy. But then he's got all these analytics that he's talking about. But I don't think back then he quite was able to marry the two together. He had bits and pieces of both. He tapped into both communities. But it left me kind of like wanting more with what does all this stuff mean? Because you could test both. You could go, well, I trusted these NFL people that were all film guys, the scout community, the NFL draft community. But then you go, a lot of what they're saying has zero to do with fantasy football, right? Which is what we're trying to predict. Then you have the analytical models that go, okay, we're going to plug in all this historic data and it's just going to tell me what the results are going to be. How many times did you see both of those models fail or at least not succeed to a degree where you go, all right, this is just going to be the way that I play.
Right.
Which kind of speaks to the fact that it had to be a blend of both. There had to be more. So then I went through this phase, right, where I'm like, I don't care about players anymore. Zero.
Right. Yep.
Let me just try to gamify the game.
Yeah.
Which leads me to go, I'm going to play in as many leagues, do as many drafts, and just accept that shit's going to go against me at these odds. But when it doesn't, I'm going to be right X amount of times. Right. I'm going to be right 30% of the time. If I play in 100 leagues, I'm going to be right in the mix, if not win 30 of them. So I'm kind of accepting a loss on 70% of the teams. It's just like drafting Underdog. We're both doing 150 BBM teams. We should probably admit defeat on 148 of them. We don't know it yet, but it's true. The odds are going to say if we get one team to the final week, we're like, man, that was the one. That's the one that's got the shot. Right. But the odds are not in your favor. So it comes full circle to just chasing, wanting more. But now, and this was one of the questions I want to ask you. So I don't know if I answered your question in whole, but
not really, but ask me what you want to ask me. Because I got like five. No, because we're gonna get it. We'll get to it. I'm just messing with you. You did. I'm just messing.
I already see you are sitting back. You got the drink.
I am. I do have the drink.
We're really getting into chopping. Let's let this thing loose. So
let's go.
I've spent 3 years completely agnostic and focused on roster construction and game theory and league psychology and all these things. But what I'm starting to notice is there is a new age of content creators out there that have acknowledged and have understood what I've been talking about. And now they go, okay, this is how Scott and a lot of his followers and people that have adopted these strategies are going to play. All right, I'm going to come up with new ways to just disrupt that. And I haven't said it yet, but this week's Destination Dynasty talks about this. is when we have these systems where we have these methods of roster construction and war, and it's perfect of how we're going to lay everything out, acknowledging that we're not always going to be right, but we're going to be right a certain amount of time. How does that get disrupted? And it gets disrupted by the people that have consumed that content for the last 3 years, and now they're breaking on the scene going, I'm just going to create chaos. I'm going to throw everything back into a blender and challenge some of these ideas. And then when that starts to come on, then it starts to be, okay, this might be the way or the new way that we're going to start adopting building teams and evaluating players.
Like what? Give me an example of this playing out. What are you getting? Where are you gearing this train up to get to?
So everyone knows DestinationDevy.com, we have a war tool, right? Mm-hmm. There's been other war tools, warp tools out there. That shit's been out for over a year. People know about it. If you're watching this show, you've probably heard about it. If not, you've used it to analyze one of your leagues. But Ray, what happens when you're in a community like ours, or you're even in it? I'll use Underdog as a more broad scope example.
Right.
We're getting to a point, maybe not yet, but we are getting to a point where in the biggest Underdog tournaments, you're going to get to a point where it's getting pretty damn efficient on what's going to win, right? Things that you must do to win: roster construction, when to draft certain players, the archetypes of players, when not to draft a certain type of player, what not to do early in a draft, what not to do late in a draft. Like, as soon as all of these rules start to being adopted by the majority of people, then what?
It's not an
You're
edge
in a
anymore.
dynasty.
It's not an
Everybody
edge anymore.
Perfect roster construction. You know who the person that's going to have the edge is? Is the person that goes, all right, I'm going to throw that spoon down the disposal and it's going to throw everything off. That's the person that in the short term has the edge because they are truly zigging when everybody else is zagging, but they're doing so in a way that we believe is suboptimal. Ah, man, that's a dumb strategy. All the other 10 people in this league understand the optimal roster construction in here.
Mm-hmm.
Yet the one person that doesn't, they may be going against the optimal. They may be going against what we would recommend doing, but they're the one person that's doing it. So how do you realize that edge? And I think that's what's coming in Dynasty here very shortly because it's a very efficient game. We already have trade calculators and sites to where I have noticed activity in a lot of leagues, and I'm saying serious leagues, not your random home league where somebody will piss away all their future draft picks because they're buying their favorite player. I'm talking about like real serious strategic players. There's just certain things that they wouldn't have done 2 or 3 years ago, or they would have done 2 or 3 years ago that they won't do today. They just know, they know it is a bad idea to trade a future first for a non-elite receiver. Like that type of behavior is slowly not becoming an edge, and it has me wondering kind of where we go from there.
It's interesting because there are so many sharp people in the fantasy space, right? There are so many different tools that you can use to show you optimal roster construction, but there are also some tools out there that are really good at identifying players, or at least things that the player should have in order to be successful. Like there's a lot of shit out there that can point to that's the guy, that's probably the guy. There's so many of those things being developed on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, I think you're going to get to a point where everybody has it, man. You know, where everybody understands the concept of what war and warp and above replacement level. People understand the concept that you already see it now. You see it now where players where people aren't taking certain positions as high as they used to. You're not seeing running backs traded in Dynasty for the capital that they once were. People are already subconsciously or in practice now doing those things. It may have taken them another year. Like you, Scott, may have gotten there a year ahead of time. We might have gotten there a couple of years before, but everybody's going to catch up to the same level at some point. So I ask you, man, what do people want? Do people just want the answer, or do people want to know why? Is the why even important? Is the how even important? Because you're asking how to gain an edge. I think you have to gain even the thinnest of margins, right? If you're really trying to gain an edge and trying to identify a pattern or a player, like it's It's going to be some grind work to get there. You're going to have to understand and comprehend the how. But is that even important today, Scott? Is it important for you to know how successful I think, I have been on this tangent for like months now about just understanding offensive groupings across the NFL. I've been talking about this for over a year. Well, I want to know how many times this team is in 11 personnel versus 12 versus 21. I want to know where the wide receiver is being deployed from. I want to know what type of routes the slot receiver on this team runs versus the outside receiver. I want to know those things because they make sense to me. They make sense to me. But do you think people even give a shit? Do you truly care, or do you just want to know, do I draft this player or don't I? Do I trade him or hold him? How much can I get? Do you think people care? And I think this is where the sort of convergence of fantasy, and then that's got multiple subsets, film, analytics, whatever, but then real football comes into play. And there's so much real football in fantasy football now. I think maybe sometimes do the two get blurred? Do you care? Does anybody care? I care, but do you care, and do you think people care about that?
Man, this is going to be a long-winded answer, but
Go ahead. I got a lot of topo and a lot of time. Go ahead. Do your thing.
No. I think the answer is yes. Most people do care, and it comes down to why we're playing this game.
Hey, if we're gonna do this tonight, don't bullshit me either. If you don't think they do, say it. Like, don't bullshit me tonight. Be real.
No. I'm gonna give you the rebuttal, and then I'm gonna give you the counterpoint why I kind of agree.
Okay.
So ultimately, I've talked about it on pods. I am a game theorist. I enjoy any sort of competition or game. That's always how my brain has been wired. And it's been, if I'm interested in whatever it is, fantasy football, chess, a card game, anything that involves strategy, Monopoly, I've always been somebody that goes, I need to understand the why. First of all, I need to understand all of the rules, all of the constraints. I'm always going to be pushing the edges. I know, Ray, you're a lawyer. I think to become a lawyer, you got to have a brain that works like that. You got to be thinking, all right, this is right up against the fringe of probably what I'm allowed to do, but I'm going to push it as far as I can, right? I need to know all of the possibilities, but I also need to know all of the constraints. Once I have all of that, it's a game. And it becomes a game when you're going up against other people that are also qualified to go through and strategize and think. Then it kind of becomes a game of back and forth of what can I get away with that somebody else isn't going to quite think about right now. And I think you're speaking to the next iteration of the why. The why do things happen? Because you could tell me, all right, you could just give me all the answers. The true, I want to leave here with more money than I started the season with, could care less how things get to the end. I just want to know the answers. Give me all the answers to the test, and I don't really need to go and show my work on finding what the variables are, right? But there becomes a point where we know there's not all the answers are ever going to be given. So I don't mind understanding the whys behind it, because in the end, like, that is going to be part of what you're always trying to solve. You're never going to be able to actually solve it in this game. But coming full circle, I think a lot of us that are coming to this game now, the people that have come from Underdog, a lot of the new age Dynasty players, they're just sharper than they were in the past. They don't care about players. They've arrived here. A lot of us have arrived with the same type of mindset that you and I have. We always want to know the why. We want to know the constraints. We want to know, can we push this outside the box strategy? That's why I've enjoyed the Underdog stuff so much. I know I'm not the best ball drafter out there. I don't have the most experience. I haven't grinded the edges as much as everybody. But I think, and both you and I have some original ideas that we go, man, I really haven't heard anybody talk about that.
Yes,
and maybe it's out a pie in the sky idea. But that's why we're doing this, right? Yeah. That is why we are playing, is to come up with the next thing that you go, man, no one's really thought about that. Does that exist in Dynasty? I don't know. Does the Dynasty game eventually morph into something a little different than what Dynasty is that we know as?
What do you mean?
Does it change a little bit? Meaning, Can you think, if I ask you, Ray, can you think of an original idea or dynasty strategy that no one has ever thought of? I could give you 10 minutes. Could you think of one that no one has ever thought to talk about, to try, whether it's a trade strategy, a draft strategy? It's hard, right? It's not like Underdog. And why in Underdog in BBM5 can you come up with some unique ideas that you haven't heard talked about before? And you know why? Because there's more constraints, right? In Dynasty, it's kind of like there's never going to be enough constraints because there's always going to be outside factors that you're never going to be able to apply to everybody that's playing. There's different buy-ins. There's different rules. You know what I mean? You're never going to be able to get a handle on all of those. So there's always going to be things that are going to be like, well, it wouldn't work in this league. It might work in this league. It could maybe work over here, but it won't work over there. So maybe I guess what I'm asking is, does the Dynasty game evolve into something that looks more like Underdog going forward? Where because if it's going to grow, does it get more to a uniform, bigger platform adopts it? It becomes more of a mainstream thing, or no?
Yay and nay. All right. Now, for everybody out there watching, this is literally the only people who are not about to be shocked about what's about to happen are the people that are in the Heisman group, because we are going into the weeds now. Yeah, I mean, we are deep into the thick of it, Scott. I don't even think it's about the size. I don't think it's about the expansion and the platform reach. That's going to happen naturally. That is naturally going to happen. Like, honestly, man, and I was having this conversation with shout out to Gene and Knight from Off the Line. I was having this conversation with them yesterday about Lawrence Jackson. Shout out to Lawrence Jackson, man. Does work with NBC. What is it? Lord Don't Lose on Twitter. Like, literally just a couple of years ago, man, Lawrence was just doing his thing on TikTok and Instagram Reels. Now this dude's on fucking NBC, man, talking fantasy football with Matthew Berry. Like, that's a part of the NFL package now. That's a part of the NFL space. You got the fantasy footballers, man. I love Andy. Andy always shows love to DD. Andy Holloway, Mike Wright, you know what I'm saying? Jason Moore, they always show love, man. Those dudes are integrated with NFL Network. They got an opportunity. Like, it's going to naturally happen where Dynasty gets bigger. Here's what's changed, Scott. It ain't the expansion. And here's what's going to change. It's the type of people playing Dynasty now that weren't playing the game 5, 10 years ago. Right? It's the type of players that when I started, man, and I know for a fact there weren't a lot of former people who had any kind of level of experience playing football other than Pee Wee or some junior high level. Maybe you had a couple here and there, but not to the degree that had the voice and the reach that I did early on. I knew that I thought about fantasy and the game way different than a lot of people. People don't know it, Scott, because we got different skin colors, but the symmetry that we have and the commonalities that we have far beyond fantasy, just in life, people would be shocked at how many things you and I are just in lockstep on. So think about having like somebody that thinks like Scott, but has a playing background and gone through some of the things playing the game that I knew people didn't think like that. But now you're seeing more people who have had experience playing collegiate sports all across the board, man. And they're into the game and they think about it differently. So it's the type of people that are coming in that are kind of, that is why it feels so merged to the NFL space. The NFL draft community and the dynasty space didn't coexist and interact like this 5 years ago. Dude, they didn't. If you were around then, it was literally like fantasy was its own little nerdy island. And now it's just integrated. You don't know, is Dane Brugler fantasy? Is he NFL? Doesn't even matter. He's talking about the same players that we're trying to draft, figure out if they're good or bad. So it's a different type of game now, man. It's way different. And you've got different perspectives and different ways of thinking about things, which is creating different content. Whether it's actionable or not, that's up to the consumer. But that's what's changed a lot of stuff in the space, man.
It's wild you mentioned the fantasy footballers because they have come from nothing to the biggest fantasy channel, show, brand, whatever out there. Now they're in the Dynasty game. They've had a Dynasty show that's been going on for a year. And, one of the things that kind of I think keeps me relevant is I do try to listen to as much content as I can. I want to consume what's going out there in the space. It's not just playing Dynasty, but it's also how are other people talking about it. I was listening to one of their shows, right? And here am I. Just was on the trade show this week with Ty. Shout out to Ty. Finally had me on the trade show. We did Dynasty trades in 5. We've done Dynasty trades in 5 for 2 years. And I'm listening to this Fantasy Footballers Dynasty show, and they're breaking down trades. And not once. I think they broke down like 3 trades at the end of their show. Not once did they talk about scoring, roster sizes, how many starters, best ball or lineup. None of that. 0. And it was just analysis from all of them. It was convicted. It was gimme A or gimme B.
That's right.
And I'm sitting here going like, damn, do you know what? This trade show right here probably has had more people listen to it than have listened to my shows in the last year. And but there's a reason. And on one hand, you sit there and you're like, damn, they have such a big platform. They can do they could announce a live Dynasty trade show, Ray, and it would fill an arena.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And
they won't mention war one damn time. They ain't gonna mention no damn war, no yards per route run.
We'll get up there and ask questions, and they'll never mention. They won't even say super flex or single QB. Like they may have to ask that. But then you sit there, like at first you're going like, damn, man, like this is, and when the funny thing is, go right to your iTunes or your pod player right now and search like Dynasty trades or whatever and Dynasty football. And
I'm gonna do it.
I bet you the Dynasty Footballers podcast is one of the first that pops up.
Let me see. Dynasty. I'm just typing Dynasty football. I hit search. Yeah, man. So Fantasy Pros, Dynasty Nerds, Dynasty Footballers 3rd. Yep.
Okay. And it's no shade on, DD or any of these others, but like that is what comes up when somebody searches, right? And so you have to
ain't no shade. They are the gold standard, man.
Correct. They have gotten to a point where people search for that. That is where eventually, if we continue to do what we're doing, like those people that are going, all right, there's got to be more to this than this show. But that's where people start. That's why the game has grown between that and all the former players that have gotten into the fantasy space and the gambling space, and they talk about it openly now on big platforms. I mean, you have platforms in live NFL games that are talking fantasy and gambling. In the middle of the game, they're talking about it.
Yeah.
And that eventually leads those people to come to Dynasty. So that's something that I always want to put into perspective, that 2-3 years down the road, we may not get 95% of those people to ever be into war and Trinity and all of that. But you know what we will get? We will get the 5 to 10% that are wired like us, that go, there's got to be more to this game. There's more to this game that I'm playing.
Yeah.
And that is something to be very thankful for, that it is growing, and we haven't even seen the growth of it that's going to hit us yet, because it's probably a couple years down the road. So I don't know why I went off that tangent, but that's just something that came to mind when I was listening to that.
Well, you got to know your lane, right? You've got to know your lane. And I don't even think you could authentically be you and not go into the detail and ask those questions and feel confident. And that doesn't mean that you're any more credible than they are, or they're less credible than you are. But that's just not that's not how you play. It's not how you play. If I said, hey, Scott, you want to trade me? If I said, Scott, you want to trade me Jerry Jeudy for Josh Downs? The answer may very well be sure. But like, you in your mind, you're not even thinking about who the better receiver is. You're thinking, why are you trying to give me a receiver for a receiver Like, what are we doing here? You're thinking about your team. What? Excuse me? Or if I said you want to trade me Brees Hall for Drake London, your first thought is like, what are we talking about in this range? But that's how you play, and that's where I want to go with this one. And I know this is buckle up, Scott. This one is going to be this is going to be a little pain point for some, but it's growth, right? I was doing something, and somewhere I saw like I was searching something, or I was asking you something, trying to do something on Chat GPT. And anyway, I saw an old Reddit post from like 2 years ago. And I just read like the first little byline of the thing. And it was something along the line, and I'm paraphrasing, of really, really like Ray, but he's so into film and doesn't give it analytics a chance. And I just laughed when I read that. And it was from 3 years ago. And I think about me 3 years ago, and I didn't. I was like, hell no, it's all about this, all about that. But you listen, you learn, you grow. And now I don't even think, I don't know what people would consider me, but I know they wouldn't say, oh, he's just some film guy. I know that for a fact. You wouldn't even consider me that anymore. That's because I've been open-minded enough to learn and to grow and to implement different things and to listen to a lot of different people present a lot of things that make a lot of sense to me from a football perspective. One of the things that has not made a lot of sense to me of late in playing Dynasty and learning more is, and let me preface this by saying, if you just get enjoyment out of playing in this format of fantasy football, then more power to you. Like, this is not the conversation for you. It's not directed at you. It's how I play now. Devy leagues, Scott, and how they relate to Dynasty, and how poor we are at predicting future outcomes for rookies. Like, in a draft cycle, we're already not very good at that. Like, in the class right now, 2024, I say, Scott, you name me and you've got to put your life is on the line. Give me the 4 rookies who finished the season in sequential order in receiving yards. Like, you wouldn't feel good about that at all. At all. Name the top 3. You'd have a formula of figuring out the bet you would place, but you would not feel very confident at that at all. Even at number 1, you wouldn't feel confident, right? So from you and others, man, when I think about what I used to do in investing in players who were like 3-4 years away from an opportunity to actually crack my roster, and especially in leagues where you've got to carry that asset in an actual spot, it got to a point where I did not enjoy the deep Devy league anymore. The ones that are where you just get like 1 or 2 and you just kind of hold them and they're away, then that's fine. But what I've found is in communities like ours, in leagues like that, nobody values them. So it's almost like no point in having them because you can't really move them for it. They have no value. And in Devy leagues, people's own evaluation of rookies is vastly different. Vastly different. Right? I think Anthony Richardson is going to be a superstar, and he thinks he's an absolute bum. How do you get a deal done? There's no middle. You're so far on opposing ends of the spectrum. I have just found them unenjoyable. And I don't think they're good bets mathematically if you're trying to win your dynasty league. But again, if you enjoy them, great. I still think it's very important to understand what the 25 class looks like. And I can tell you that from every single position, what the 26 class looks like. But even then, you're probably like, there's a couple that you think are going to be pretty good, but you don't have a damn clue. And you want me to predict the 27 and 28? I don't know. And I damn sure wouldn't tell you to trade Brandon Ayuk or Deontay Johnson for it either. But that's my opinion because that's how I play now. That ain't how I played before when Rondale Moore was going to be the second coming, but I've learned my damn lessons. How's it changed for you, man? How's this shift in these leagues, man? How is it? because you were in them with me. We were in them. And you're still in a few. But talk about it, man.
So I'm going to go back to, I believe the official date was August 27th of 2023. Okay. We did a destination chill. Because I remember where I was. I wasn't at home. I was in Kentucky, just finishing up the Kentucky drafts in KFFSC. We had a debate. I don't know if you remember this. You may or may not.
I remember
After
everything,
week
but whether
one
I want to remember it tonight or not is a different story.
Oh,
so
no.
Go ahead.
It speaks to what you're talking about. We debated a specific player and how to value him in Dynasty. You remember who it was? After week one of the season last year. This was one of the earlier destination chills. It was when we just started moving to Sunday nights during the season.
Week one.
We debated a player. And I may go back and listen to this episode just because I was very respectful of your take. But if you go back and listen, I bet you'll see that there's a little bias that shined through. But we debated Zachariah Branch. You remember that?
USC, yes. Yes.
Zachariah Branch.
Yes, I do remember it.
I think we actually debated whether you would take Brandon Ayuk or Zachariah Branch. And I think you made your point that, because I think you were on the Zachariah Branch side. Would you trade one for the other? And this was clearly before Ayuk had the season that he had. Okay, so that we weren't even talking about. We were just talking about the pedestrian. We know he's a solid receiver, but he might not be a difference maker range, right? And you were, man, I'm not giving up Zachariah Branch because you see, he had that monster week one. This is going to be the next whoever you want to put. Reggie Bush, Marvin Harrison, whatever. Just the next big thing. And he didn't disappoint. He's still valued very highly in Devy leagues.
Yes.
But I think it came down to, without you saying it, the reason that you might have had hesitation there still was not, and I'm giving you a compliment here, it wasn't you knew Zachariah Branch was going to be the next Tyreek Hill. Can't miss. First round pick. Gonna smash. Wait till 2028 when he's smashing in my Dynasty league.
Nope.
That was not it. I think your lens was this asset. There's going to be an even better window to sell this asset.
That was it. Yep.
And I'm not doing it now for a pedestrian.
Right.
I'm not selling him for Jaden Reed because there's 6 Jaden Reed every draft.
Right.
I'm going to wait.
I remember that conversation. Yep.
We've kind of lost track of that conversation a little bit when it comes to Devy leagues because now people just think I sell all Devy players. Oh, you mean you sell all your Devy picks? You sell all your Devy players? No, but I mean, think about how hard it is to trade in Dynasty today.
Yeah.
Think about how hard it is right now to trade Marshawn Lloyd for a future second. You may be able to do it, but in some leagues where you drafted him at the 211, 210, 209, you might not have been able to trade him for a second. And I bring up Marshawn Lloyd because he's one of those Devy names that after the first year, you would have gone, man, but before his freshman year, can't miss.
Can't miss.
Then he tears his ACL, and then he transfers, and then he's completely off the radar.
Done for.
Then he rises back from the dead, and he hits, dude.
Isn't it funny?
To be a third-round running back, he is the 98th percentile of what you would expect from a Devy freshman running back. Yeah. Like, shy of him becoming Jahmyr Gibbs or Bijan or going in the early second round, he has hit the almost peak of what you could have expected, right?
Yeah.
But what do you actually have if you have him? Man, I hope he has some opportunity, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the perspective you have to put in mind for people with Devy leagues. It is great to take the outlier and go, man, if you would have been in on CJ Stroud before he was named the Ohio State starter, look what you have today. But how many rotting carcasses along the way did you think?
Let's talk about it real quick. Ajayi Hall. Remember after that spring game? You go search on GQ's Twitter, man. I was pumping him. Yes. I meant everybody. Where's he at?
if you search at RayGQ and just insert a random failed prospect, there's a chance there is a tweet out there going,
Get the fuck
I
out of
had to
here.
watch this bad play. I
Get the
can't
fuck
wait.
out of here. It wasn't that bad, but he was definitely on the list.
He was.
Hey,
he was.
he was on the list for everybody. But keep going. Yes. Every year, dude.
The point is, I think with Devi, to sum up your question, we lose sight as to how hard it is to become a dynasty relevant asset. Quarterbacks, you got to be a first round pick. There's like average of 3 per year. You get in a Devi league and man, that's 25 quarterbacks that should be valued like the low end starters in the NFL. Like someone will legitimately tell you this guy, Cam Ward, man, I'd rather have Cam Ward over Derek Carr. And the reality is the math is just against Cam Ward, even getting to a point where he's in the NFL, let alone cutting those thresholds where you go, he's a chance to start. Same with running backs. Shy of just hitting on any running back on a 53, it's real hard to get into the range where you're a difference maker. Receivers, man, you still got to be a first, second, third round pick at receiver to be relevant. Tight end, you don't even touch those in Devi because it's the most random positions. So the point is, if you're in a Devi league, just keep in perspective, there are about maybe 4 to 6 players that you can forecast that are going to matter going into the next year.
Yeah.
And yet there's leagues where there's 30, 40, 50 Devi assets that people will not move. They just will, for what you said. The quarterback they have, that's the guy that's going to be a first rounder. And there's 9 managers that think they each have a quarterback that's going to be a first rounder. Odds are at least 7 of them are going to be wrong.
Well, let me ask you. But there still has to be a level of conviction on an outcome of a player. If you just want to wait till the answers of the test are presented in front of you to and then say, oh yeah, I was going to pick that anyway. Like, where's the fun in that? You still have to have. There still needs to be a layer of evaluation that says like this person or this thing or this company or this tool is good at helping identifying the bets that I want to make. You still have to have that.
Is that conviction on the player?
Yes.
Or for you? Because I think for you, what you're really saying is it is conviction on the sentiment of that player at that player's market.
No, I had the conviction that Anthony Richardson was going to be fucking good. Like, not just what the sentiment was not good, but yet we still even as we get it, now it's jumped the shark, unfortunately. But as much as the dynasty space has grown, like people, how do you not see that coming a mile away? And there were still people screaming up and down, he ain't gonna be a first round pick. No way. There's not a chance. Scott, even through this 2024 cycle, we both individually got to a point where there's no chance Michael Penix is going to be a first-round pick, let alone a top 10 pick. Bo Nix, no way. No, he's not good enough. Whenever you talked about him, when we talked about him, unless it was a very intentional way to saying if he's selected in there, it was never with any confidence that he was going to be a first-round, wasn't even mocked out that way. So that area of the space is still not grown or at least evolved in the way that that other things have. People still don't have the stones to take a stand on one side or the other, whether you're right or wrong.
So what do you learn from that? Do we go forward by phrasing the conversation of asking ourselves and asking our listeners a lot more questions when it comes to a guy like Michael Penix? Because I do think if we would have just phrased it as, what if? And now you may look at me and go, you're psycho to say Michael Penix is going to go in the top 10. But if I ask the question, what if he does? To quote you, the famous, I'm just asking the question, right?
Yeah.
What if I ask the question, if Shedeur Sanders is not a first-round pick next year, how will he be treated? Because he's already setting up to be somebody that's very polarizing.
Right.
But and most people would go, oh, man, the quarterback market, there's a starvation for him. He's going to go in the first, right? But what if I said, what if he's not?
No, I actually think this is a great player, but I think there are a lot of people, for whatever reason, don't think he's a first round because they don't like him. So he's not. Their mind doesn't even comprehend a world in which he is a first round pick.
Okay, then
you
take
got,
that.
but you
Shedeur
got those
Sanders
people giving
101?
dynasty advice.
What if Shedeur Sanders is the 101? Will he be valued similar to where we were valuing even Drake May or Bryce Young? Yes or no?
I don't know. I think I just follow some idiots, man. I went on a follower cleanse this past week. I don't know what the true sentiment is. I'm going to guess bearish, but for what? Like, I just don't understand. What are people upset? Why do people not like him? Tell me, what is that? What is the hate? What is the concrete mixture there in the hate? Because it can't be the performance. It's the wins. It's him doing this. It's him doing this. Like, what is it? Because here's one thing we both can universally agree on about the dynasty space: is fickle as hell, and it will shift like the wind, like a fart under the bed. Like it just literally, it just day by day, it doesn't matter. They will go with the flow. All it takes is one big name person to say something, and then everybody else turns a corner. I guess he's not that bad. So I don't know what the true. There's a lot of white knight caping up right now. I don't know what the true sentiment is out there on Shedeur, but for the sake of this conversation, let's go with his sentiment is bearish. If he's not a first round pick, if he's a second round pick, people aren't. I mean, you've got a half dead asset on your roster.
Well, I was thinking that because it's funny because this example, maybe we see different things. Because my perception was a lot of the analysis I see on Shedeur is he's not that good. He doesn't. He's got this flaw. He's got that flaw. Yet, a lot of that analysis is always met with but he's probably going to be a first round pick.
Okay.
Right? It's almost like I'm not going to be the one that says I'm high on him. But I got to throw that caveat in there at the end. And, man, he's probably going to go in the top 10, top 15.
But I don't – he should – my lens says he shouldn't. But he probably will. Oh, yeah.
Right.
The ultimate stand. The ultimate stand.
If the sentiment is that he isn't going to, then I would flip it around and go, what if he's the 101? If he's the 101, are we going to treat him like we've treated other quarterbacks that went the 101? I mean, he's not going to be Joe Burrow or Trevor Lawrence or Caleb Williams.
Depends on what team he goes to. Depends on the team.
And I'll give the example of J.J. McCarthy this year, right? Nobody liked J.J. McCarthy, really, until it became clear that the NFL liked him.
Yeah.
Then you got certain people out there going, man, he's my QB1.
Yeah.
He's my QB2. Now you get into draft season. Not everybody likes J.J. There's still a lot of people that are scared of him. But I'll tell you what, there's probably 50-50. There's 50% of your league that's going, dude, this is the dude. We just didn't see it in college. Ever. But they're probably listening to some of those voices out there that going, J.J. McCarthy's my QB1. He's got everything you would want for, and he went to the dream spot. But they would have never had that perception until they started listening to those voices. So you were right. There can be just one or two people that run with a narrative and it totally flips around how a player is viewed. Even Shedeur, and he's going to enter the league with, all of the white knights, all of the people out there that do not like any sort of, flamboyancy or anybody talking about money or all of those people are going to go, he's a bust. Not a leader. He never won in college.
Never won at the school that y'all said he shouldn't go to. Because they don't win. He couldn't win at Colorado. Yes.
Yeah.
Jay, real quick. I just want to. 270 Videos has been rocking with us all night. Shout out 27 Videos, man. He is team what we talk about and put down. He says Bryce Underwood went 201. I just want to know some of the current rookies or who did he get picked over? Was this
How deep are we talking here? Is this like 8 years of Devy's? Like, is there 300?
Crazy. What? Where do we go from here, though, man? Because again, you still have to have a level of conviction or process or tool or something to help you understand at least what is coming next year. Like if I told you right now, Scott, neither of us have watched the 24 college football season has not come yet. Neither of us have done this extensive research into the class, but you, generally speaking, know where the strengths and the weaknesses are within the positional groups of the class. You know that it's going to be a strong running back class, that right now the QB class is very much uncertain from one to whatever. You know that there are a couple of wide receivers that could be some high-end guys, and you know right now there might be a tight end, but we really don't even care about that. Like, you understand those things, right? So it's still important to understanding what's coming next down the line and what's happening. So my question to you is, what is coming down the line for Dynasty? Because I have seen you take a very uh, and I mean this in a respectful way, and I mean this from the sense of childlike like excitement and the curiosity, and this is new to explore, right? Like infancy. You are, for people that don't know, you are truly diving into Underdog. You are going in on BBM. You are excited when the some of the smaller tournaments release. You're waiting for that super flex. Let's get that popping. Let's get super flex going. Underdog promo code ALLGAS. But you really are getting to trying to kind of expand some of your dynasty principles to this seasonal tournament, over 1 million people, and you're always involved in the FFPC. I was on Best Ball After Dark with Peter Overzet. Shout out to Pete a couple of weeks ago, man. And I said, I think the future of fantasy gaming is this tournament style sort of play. And we can go from how people treat Dynasty as modified redraft to the predominant thing turning into this tournament style. Where do you think the space is headed 5 years from now? Because it looks way different now. You wouldn't have told me 5 years ago that Debbie wouldn't be the biggest thing in fantasy football. There's no doubt it's going to be the biggest thing. You know, where does it go? How are we playing Dynasty differently now? Because I see you now in Dynasty leagues doing things that I see you do in Underdog. Paying more attention to some correlation here and there. Making more bets, taking more players. Moving other players more liberally, freely. What do you think, man? Where are we going?
Man, that's a loaded question. That is one of the ones I was not prepared for. But I do think that we're going to start seeing more uniformity in Dynasty. I think we're going to start seeing more best ball Dynasty. We're going to start seeing a lot of the people that have caped up for Underdog and are super interested. Underdog releases a tournament and it fills in 12 hours. I mean, there's clearly interest for this type of game because it's a different game. It's a constrained, confined. There's no waivers. There's no trading. You have to make the decisions, and the decisions, every time you make one, another one builds on top of another one, on top of another one, and you get this final product where the brilliance of that is that everybody is subject to the same constraints, right? Totally different in Dynasty. If you're going to allow people to trade and buy future years of picks and move them, like that's never going to be something that goes away. But I do think if it's going to grow in a way where I don't want to say Dynasty Underdog becomes Dynasty, but I think there's going to be a form of Dynasty that starts looking a lot like what Underdog is, whether that means big tournaments or, however that's going to look like, it's still to be determined. But I do think that is something that is going to continue with the growth. Hell, Underdog may get into Dynasty at some point. I don't know.
Would you be interested, Scott? Would you be interested in a Dynasty league that is an annual reset and it's like a tournament every year? Like, I guess essentially your Dynasty are the people that you're in it with, and maybe you make something like, can you see it being modified? Which, again, remember the beginning of the conversation, I said it's like a reciprocal game. Isn't it like a fucking keeper league?
I was just thinking a keeper.
You know what I'm saying?
That's like an Underdog keeper where there are future draft picks. There are kind of a reset or a re-roll. There's probably a limited window where you can fix stuff, where you can drop players, where you can trade players, but it's limited. It isn't year-round. It isn't you have to look every week. Right. It does have a confined, the season plays out, and what you've decided back in May, in June, and July is what it is. But it still has an aspect of Dynasty to where it goes from year to year, and there's always going to be a level of continuance. It's not just, hey, we just quit. Next year it starts over again. But I can see it morphing into something like that. I do think in the shorter term, back to the players a little bit.
Yeah.
I've been wondering a little bit with this, and tomorrow's Destination Dynasty is going to talk about this and go into it a little more detail. But I want to ask you about this wide receiver saturation idea, Ray. You've probably heard me talk about it, and I'm going to give you a couple examples of players that a couple years ago would have been treated a little bit differently, but now I think they're the prototypical examples of exactly what I'm talking about here. So I'm going to name you two names that started off as first-round NFL picks or very high NFL draft picks, okay?
Let's do it. Yep.
So one of them was drafted in the first round. One of them was drafted in the early second round from a couple years ago. And I'm speaking of the names Jameson Williams and Christian Watson.
Okay.
You would agree, both of those guys, this is make or break for them this year, right?
Absolutely.
Like, they're still drafted in a range where you understand what they can bring to the table. You don't feel great about clicking them. Do you agree that in Underdog, and we can use Underdog as kind of a general way the market is being valued right now, they're right at the beginning of that tier where you don't feel great, right?
Oh, yeah.
But you go, man, their pedigree, they've had some games before, their offenses, like, you can sell yourself to make that click. I can give you guys that are 4 rounds lower that have the exact same profile, and you go, nah, I'm good. So there's still something bringing you in on both of those two players. But you would also agree that, let's talk Dynasty perspective here. One right now, Christian Watson, wide receiver 36. So he's still hanging on above guys like Christian Kirk, Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs. I mean, he's just ahead of those guys. And then J-Mo's at wide receiver 45. So right above Hollywood Brown, Amari Cooper, Deontay Johnson, and Calvin Ridley. Now, I just named you a bunch of guys that go way higher than those two in Underdog, right? Ridley,
Yes.
Amari Cooper, Terry McLaurin, Stephon Diggs, Cooper Kupp. So what's reflected in the market is both players, the community has confidence that both of them are going to bounce back, that they are going to stay, maybe not difference makers, but they're just going to hover in this, damn, that's a good receiver. That's a guy that's going to hold some value. And what the wide receiver saturation theory is that if either one of those guys gets injured or gets hurt or has a bad season or gets passed up by somebody else on their depth chart, they're buried. They're Treylon Burks, they're Rashad Bateman, they're Elijah Moore. They're at the bottom to where you go, well, cool. Elijah Moore, he's still in the league, right? Maybe I'll draft him one time in the 18th round in Underdog. But that's how quick it happens. Yet in the meantime, if you polled people in this chat right now, and they said, Ray, who would you rather have in Dynasty? Would you rather have Zach Charbonnet or Christian Watson?
Mm-hmm.
What would you say? A lot of people probably say Christian Watson, right?
Watson, probably.
Okay. So let's go a little bit of a tier higher than Zach Charbonnet. Let's go to, I'm trying to think of a good running back that perfectly fits this category. Jaylen Warren. And I hate to use Jaylen Warren just because a lot of people really like Jaylen Warren. Let's go Kyren Williams. Okay? Would you agree if Kyren Williams has a bad year and gets injured this year that he's also going to get buried?
Yeah, yes, correct.
But why would people value the receiver over the running back in these cases? Why would somebody be scared of the Kyren but be in on the JMO? Well, what would be the logic going through their head of, and it wouldn't even be, I know one is good and one is bad, because both of them have shown they're good in spurts.
Right.
But what would be the logic of the average Dynasty player that would lean the receiver over the running back there? What would it be? What would the phrasing they'd probably use?
I think there are a couple of different answers. Tell me if I'm right with a few of these. Is it the value of the wide receiver position? Is it the offense that they're in? Is it their age and they've got more time?
I think the first one you're onto it. The offense, I don't think people necessarily look at the offenses per se, but
it's the positional value of how people value running back versus receiver today. No one cares about the running back. It's It's split backfields. There's no bell cows anymore. These positions don't matter. Everyone knows RBs don't matter. Fade them. You don't draft them in Underdog. You don't do it in Dynasty, damn it.
I'm reading some comments in the chat here, and it's, let's see. The logic that receiver has more longevity. Yep. Okay.
Yep.
Watson's 25, Green Bay.
There's the age. So age team. I gave you the reasons what people would say. The age
and the receiver has more longevity.
Yes.
Look, basically, what I'm saying is we are seeing examples where the receivers don't have any longevity.
No.
You know, the receivers that have longevity are the ones that are good.
Well, this is okay. So now let's stay on what you're talking about. As you're reading me this list, do rankings even matter, Scott? Do they even fucking matter, dude? Do they do the dynasty rankings matter? I've heard you talk about this ad nauseum, that it doesn't matter what it says on Keep Trade Cut, you can't go get it on the market, so it's not true. If you can't go sell this thing way below or above that for the thing way below and get the leverage, get the plus, then it's fake value. It's ADV. Do rankings even matter anymore? Do they matter? Are you checking your ranks before you make draft every time? Before you make a pick, are you checking your ranks? Dynasty leagues, are you going back to your sheet and checking those ranks? Make sure you take RB 44 over RB 50 over 45. You've got to make sure you do that. That you got to follow those ranks. Do they matter anymore?
They don't, and I'll give you an example of exactly what you're talking about. If you were a stock investor and you really had an idea that a company was really going to perform well over the second half of this year, right? And I told you can buy this stock, so you buy it. But the one caveat, Ray, is you are not allowed to sell that stock for 5 years. Would it really matter if in that first quarter that stock goes up 15%? It makes you feel good, right? It makes you feel good that Christian Watson is not flamed out of the league like Zach Evans could be. But if I told you it's not going to matter because you can't do anything with it, you're just sitting there. It's actually more torturous to watch it go up, knowing you can't sell it for 5 years. Because then you're going, man, what if it goes down? You know what I mean? Like, I'm helpless. And I'm not saying you're helpless in Dynasty, but I think in this receiver range, you generally are helpless. Like, it's fake value.
Yeah.
Probably what you're envisioning J-Mo could be, or the reason that you would value him over a guy like Zach Charbonnet, it doesn't actually exist that you could go out and trade him for that. So you're still making a bet on which one lasts longer, and you're still having some conviction on, is Jameson Williams going to succeed or not?
Right.
Because you can't go out there and go, because you'll hear this, I mean, I'd rather have the receiver because he has this potential. But really what you might be saying is, I'd rather have the receiver because I have a little bit of a longer time. I saw a comment in the chat. Let me see where it was. It was from Wayne Mackey. Let me see if I can find it.
Well, I got it right here. Is this the one?
Yes. Wide receiver has more time to bounce back, break out. What do you think about that statement, Ray? Is that true? Or do you think now we're getting those consensus made up on a lot of receivers quicker than we used to be?
The funny thing about this statement is, it feels like maybe that should be the case. But yet, I saw Amir Abdullah on the field last year taking carries at the end of the season. I'm not seeing the failed receivers outside of a handful that just were in situations where there was nobody left. I don't know. I don't know if there's a lot of bounce back for anybody. Football just doesn't work. Here's where football doesn't work like that. Like, once you have shown an ability not to be able to do something, like, very rarely do you get, like, they don't have time to waste on you. Because normally after you failed at receiver in 3 years, the coaching staff is probably turned over, or they've moved on, or you've moved on. So you're in a new like, it doesn't football just doesn't work like that. There aren't all these bounce back opportunities once you fail. even when you succeed, you're stripped of that title. T. Higgins succeeded, is a rookie, and they got Jamar Chase in. Devontae Smith set the Philadelphia Eagles rookie receiving record, and they trade for A.J. Brown in the very next draft. Like, even when you succeed, they're looking for the next thing. So if you fail as a rookie, ain't no damn bounce back. Very rarely. You've got to be the special type of someone like a Josh Gordon to fail a whole bunch and then get an opportunity and be good and then still get some opportunities. But that's the outlier, not the norm. It's not how football works.
Well, let's talk about a name this past week that's been in the news that fits this bill, where the goalposts have been moved. Any idea who I'm talking about?
You said the goalposts.
Got a little buzz. A former first-round pick has gotten some buzz this week. Going into year 4. Has definitely been unavailable a lot.
Oh, Bateman?
Has been bad a lot.
Rashad Bateman.
Now, he is what the failed Christian Watson JMO year this year looks like next year. An afterthought, but he's good enough to where he's probably going to get 2 or 3 more years minimum, if not longer. He's going to bounce around. Wouldn't you agree with that? He belongs on an NFL roster. So to call him dog shit, he sucked.
He does not suck.
That because we expected him to be
very
one of the
good
best.
Very early. Yes.
And because he's a wide receiver 3 or 4 or 5 in the NFL, he's bad. So the goalposts have moved. But like here would be the logic on somebody like Bateman. What does he have to do? And there may be an opposing argument to this. What does he have to do to go, man, I sold him for a second? Can you see a world where that happens?
One good game.
Okay. You think one good game?
Okay, one good game, people are 75% hard. One good game, they are 75% hard.
So
he goes out there and
they need to see that second game, and if they see that, then it's in?
They can get it in, but it would be a lot easier if it was like 90% hard. So that happens in week 2. He out-targets Zay Flowers in week 2. You can get a second for Rashad Bateman. No doubt about it. No doubt. What do you think? You might have said much more. People like him, dude. People really like Rashad Bateman. And when you think, now we're getting into the weeds, football. When you think about Baltimore's offense and their receiving core, he presents something that's a little different than Zay Flowers. It feels more like, Scott, even if it's just a 4-week rental, it feels like he can be more complement to Zay Flowers. They found their pair of the future. He does something a little different than Zay. Compliments Mark Andrews, works with Lamar Jackson. Think about what they didn't do. They didn't go out there and prioritize another. Yeah, they got Devontae Walker, but I'm as bad as Bateman has been, I'm not expecting and anticipating Tez Walker to be better than Rashad Bateman out the rip. I'm just not. I don't think it's going to take much. 2 games and you get a second for him. And here's what goes back to Devy. It's a bad class. 25, man, nothing but running backs. Bad quarterbacks. Only a couple of receivers, no tight ends. It's a bad class. You can get a second in a bad class 25. Air quotes.
Okay. I'm going to pose a different question to you. Let's say week 1, and I saw a good comment in here about 270 videos, one good game, especially if it's week 1. People have week 1 bias.
That's what I said. Hey, we vibing tonight. Yes, that's what I'm saying.
That first game where people are starving new information.
Game 1.
Yes.
Game 1, he goes out there and out-targets Zay Flowers. Here's the thing. He doesn't even have to do that, Scott. Just do something good.
He needs to look like he's on par with Zay Flowers. You got to go.
Yes.
He's the 1B to Zay Flowers. The Ravens have their wide receiver 2. And that's an offense I want in. You can see how people can get to the conclusion. Here's another one. Roschon Johnson gets injured in preseason. Week 1, it's a 60-40 split between DeAndre Swift and Khalil Herbert. Khalil gets 13 touches and scores a touchdown. People be willing to buy him? People be willing to go, man, I know Swift's going to get hurt.
Yeah,
This is one of the
here's
better
the thing.
backup running backs in fantasy, and it's an offense I want attached to.
No, not right away because he's Khalil Herbert.
Can you think of another name where that would apply? That already doesn't have any value.
Yes. Yeah.
Kendre Miller.
Oh yeah, people will be, but it's the perception going in. If it they will buy Kendre Miller.
Glad I said
yes,
because at that point you're kind of making. Let's say both of those things are true, right? Kendre
if
Miller.
If it's Gus Edwards, will they buy him? Will they buy Gus Edwards? No, for cheap, but they won't pay what he's worth.
Right. Okay. Someone said if it's Roschon that has that 60-40. Then it's true. I should have just used the other Bear running back. But Roschon, it applies to all the guys from last year.
Yeah.
I don't care if they didn't do anything. Roschon, Tank Bigsby, Kendre Miller, if any of them are in a 65-35 where it looks like they're going to have a role, all of a sudden it's – now you may not fire out the second right off the rip, just like you might not with Bateman.
Yeah.
But doesn't it kind of become the same exact kind of bet? Because unless you're telling me I'm not buying Rashad Bateman so he can give me wide receiver 38 numbers for the next 6 years. That's the longevity argument. And the reality is there's going to be guys that just pass him up over that time.
Yeah, I'm not.
So I don't care how long he's going to last.
No.
And that's the wide receiver saturation theory, where unless you can go through and just sell receivers that already are in this range of like they're just the longevity doesn't matter because what they're giving me just doesn't matter that much. I do think we probably have some bias against running backs, and I do think next year's class is going to be a perfect time for people to start realizing it. You're going to see people writing articles going, you know, like the shelf life of the new age running back of the shelf life of Jaylen Warren probably isn't that different than the shelf life of Christian Watson. Yet the answer would have always been, give me the receiver because they last longer. But I think you're going to start seeing that come back full circle with how fast receiver turnover here is, because there's just, if you're not an elite receiver, even if you're the Michael Pittmans of the world, the Brandon Ayuks, the DK Metcalfs, you're probably going to stay around in a relevant range for a while. But you know who was in that range 2 years ago? Courtland Sutton. We viewed him as like one of these 26-year-old receivers that was a wide receiver 2, you know? And then some bad stuff happens along the way, an injury here, a bad year here, a bad quarterback there. 3 years later, someone said earlier in the chat, Courtland Sutton's a guy 0 people are interested in. And he's better than Rashad Bateman, far better than Rashad Bateman.
He is.
But you go, man, he's 27,
so
28, don't care anymore.
So here's where I think, let me give some, for the final 15 minutes, I want to future cast. I want to think about where it's really going and put some claim to it. But I just want to highlight, shout out to John Hendricks, who's been in here all night, really engaged. Subscribe to the channel, appreciate it. And if you are not subscribed, make sure you do that. Where's the button at subscribe? But this is why you have to have the Batemans. He said third year's breakouts still exist. Nico proved it last year. There's still people who believe that this is a likely, just as much as people think that this is not possible for Bateman to do any damn thing this year, you've got a whole contrasting side that thinks that it is. And it goes to where I think the game, I think it's already there, man. And we continue to talk about this thing, Scott. And I don't know what the thing is. We call it ADV, but it's the sentiment of the player. How do people feel? And I think this starts long before they get into the NFL. It starts around that pre-draft process. How do people feel about these guys when everybody knows about them, right? It doesn't, here's the thing, Scott. It doesn't fucking matter that I talked about Ollie Gordon 2 years ago. It doesn't. Like, sure, you can go back and be like, oh, Ray was talking about him a long time ago. But if we get to February and he is viewed as one of the top running backs in the class and everybody starts talking about him, that's what builds the ADV. Not the fact that I said it years ago or earlier. It's when everybody starts to universally either agree or disagree on a player. Not a draft pick location, not when they get drafted, not what team they go to, not what scheme they fall into. It goes back full circle to how people feel about the player and who you listen to as far as how they get to where they get to tell you about that player. Whether that be route chart success, whether that be nothing but the numbers, whether that be my dog from Draft Network, Damian Parson, ain't looking at none of that shit. He's telling you what he's seeing on the field. It starts right then. The perception. Now, draft capital can change things to a degree. The landing spot can change things to a degree. But the sentiment that was invested in that player at the beginning, that is what contains the longevity. Not how young the player is, not how old the player is. It's the sentiment that was baked into the prospect before they were even drafted. That's how long of a leash they get. Because any other failed rookie wide receiver tethered to a quarterback that's got a $200 million deal, they did at least give him a chance in year 2, but ain't nobody giving QJ a shot in hell. I don't want him. He's done. He's cooked. He's crushed. Doesn't matter. Right? And that very well may be the case, but we will make excuses for others who fail multiple times. We love Drake London. What has he done for your fantasy roster, Scott, the past 2 years? What's he done? I love him. He was my wide receiver 1, and I still think he's one of the most talented. But what has he done the first 2 years? Better than Quentin Johnson. I'm not comparing the two, but I'm just talking about how we shift and why we shift. I think the game is headed to a lot of that, man. I think what you're saying about Shedeur Sanders is very correct. I think that we will be able to identify some players that regardless of where they're drafted, if you take them in Dynasty, you've got a very, very volatile asset. Bo Nix is one of them. Michael Penix feels like he turned into one. The draft capital should have helped him, but now it's like hurt him. You got to know what you're drafting. I think that is where a lot of player picking is going to come. It's by people who have the power to inject a prospect with whatever it is that they feel, and that thing becomes the prevailing thought in the space. I know that's kind of a lot and a little bit in the weeds, but I think I am very much in on how people are feeling. If you just Twitter query different prospects and just something can aggregate together positive sentiment or negative about this name, I think that within fantasy football, I think you can I think those rankings would be far more indicative and predictive of what you can get on the market versus trades that you see on this service or that service,
Yeah, 100%. I think being able that is one of the new age, I think, advantages, that if the people that can harness that information and draw conclusions from it, or at least make bets with that data, whether they're right or wrong, they're at least using it to try to forecast how their league mates, and it's going to vary. Like, it's going to vary in terms of not everybody's going to have that same resource that they're listening to. There's going to be some that are louder than others, but I do think being able to harness that, put it together in some sort of score tool place where you can go, I'm pulling this data. That's all I care about. That's what I'm going to make my decisions on. Forget about anything else, analytics, film, whatever. I'm going to inject that as the main driver when I'm making a draft selection. There's a couple other comments I wanted to read.
Okay.
BS put a comment in there. So future casting, would we like to see leagues deeper? You can't have wide receivers 20 through 100 being the same and all being on the bench. What are your thoughts on that, Ray? Because I do think, I don't know if it goes mainstream, but I do think, imagine right now if you took Underdog and you added 2 starters and you added another 7 roster spots. So we made it a start 10, 25-man roster draft, and that became the standard. A lot of our analysis would get thrown out of the window, right? We'd have to go deeper. Yes. There would be certain ranges of players that are less desirable because the next range of players, the difference in what you would expect is so low.
Right.
But now they're going to be getting drafted. So just think about that. And I do think that BS is onto something with that comment. I don't know if it becomes mainstream because I've been saying this in high stakes forever. I've been playing FFPC for this is going to be my 9th year. You know how many times I've sat at those tables with millionaires that are putting up 6 figures to draft against me, and they beat me. I'm not saying I'm one of the best players either. They beat me on a regular basis. Ray, I'm sitting here going, man, dude, if this was a start 11,
you'd kill
28 man, I'd wipe the floor with everybody.
Well, this BS's second comment is this, man, and he's absolutely right. Because he's basically saying, okay, there's not a big difference between 36 through 50. Well, then let's expand the pool. Because there is a big difference between wide receiver 24 and 61 or 61 and 8. Or I like where he's going with this. I don't know
if that was true, what would you probably have to focus more on? What'd you talk about at the beginning of the show? The why.
The why.
Marcus Robinson versus Jalen Hyatt would matter.
Yes, it would.
You would have to be able to decipher the why one over the other, not just correlation or stacking, but the why, the stuff that you're most interested in is trying to figure out the why behind players are being used the way that they are. That would start to matter. So I don't know if it ever gets there, but I do think if we wanted to grow and get to a place where some of that stuff matters, the nuance matters, and it's not just any running back outside the top 8 doesn't matter. Any tight end outside the top 6 doesn't matter. Any receiver outside the top 12 doesn't matter. Right. Quarterbacks replaceable after the 3 or 4 rushing quarterbacks. But that's the reality. That is the game. All those things I just said is true. We are debating the smallest of edges with the everybody else's. But just imagine if they came in and went, yep, we're going to a start 12.
It'd be way different game, man. I want to highlight this. I want to highlight this from Patrick. Patrick says ADV is really interesting because it varies on a case-by-case basis. Yeah. But it isn't that Dynasty, though. How can you have a ranking system in place that applies to – there's so many different leagues. There's so many different type of formats. There are positions that do matter versus the ones that don't. It goes back to – it should be fluid. Like if you're really let me ask you right now, Scott, right now, fair to say that you have Breece Hall right now today as a top 5 Dynasty running back?
Yes.
Today.
Yes. Easy.
He tears his ACL tomorrow. Where does he go in your rankings? Just to hype it that outside. Let me say this: outside of the top,
outside of a rank, give a shit where he's ranked.
It changes. It is a week by. It truly is a day by day, a week by week, a league by league, a format by roster variable that changes weekly. Here goes one for you, Scott Connor. Let's play the opposite game. Where would you have Adam Thielen ranked today in Dynasty? Outside of a range that probably really matters, right? What happens when you notice on a competing roster, he's the number 1 target, over 30% target share, he's scoring 16 points a game, and someone's selling him for a late third, a pair of fourths? Are you more interested in that, buying that Thielen, opposed to giving up your first and second round picks 2 years from now to go buy Jefferson the same week, to buy Amon-Ra the same week? It changes by your need, by your league, by the scoring format. It's all of that, dude. If I were to just tell you to use this ranking system and run with it, that'd be a surefire way to lose money in some leagues, for sure. Like, there are so many different things. Like, there's just more to it.
It's interesting you bring up Thielen, because what would happen if Adam Thielen and Cooper Kupp, through 4 weeks, Adam Thielen's the one with a higher target share, Adam Thielen's the one scoring more points? Would they ever get to a point where people would say they're equal? Or would it just be Cooper Kupp is done, but it isn't Adam Thielen goes anywhere? It's almost like it's either you would want him or you don't. There is no ranking him. There is no I'm moving him up ahead of Cooper Kupp in Dynasty. None. It's just Cooper Kupp sucks. He's now irrelevant. Adam Thielen also sucks and irrelevant, but he's had a good couple games. So it's very interesting with that sentiment. And I want to go back to that comment about it's league by league, case by case. Because isn't that, you've talked about this, I've talked about this, isn't that, I think, a very unexplored space? We don't have enough time to go into it tonight, but isn't that a very unexplored space of Dynasty, is also the person that can kind of psychologically evaluate their league mates quicker and figure out what the sentiment is that
100%.
they are is the one that's probably going to have the edge. Forget about whether you have your own sentiment that can pick players. If I can go in and I can read the room faster than everybody else, that is an edge that we are just on the very, very infancy of exploiting. And that gets into like literally psychology. Like there's going to be somebody that comes along, Ray, with a psychology background that is going, I have a dynasty psychology book that will teach you how to read your league mates. And here's what you got to do. You got to talk to them. You know what I mean? Like there's going to be somebody that comes in with that type of thing and you're going, I never thought about it, but it's there.
Don't you think that, and shout out to you and Clay and Shane and everything that you guys do, Kanja, Sanford, Todd Claire, everybody that does roster reviews. But understanding that league is very important. It's very important. Probably
the
most important thing is because it doesn't matter how much I like Anthony Richardson if your league doesn't value the quarterback position. Doesn't matter that I have him as number one if you would never be able to get that in your market, if your league economy is not set up to absorb that or help you realize that artificial dynasty value, man. We've got one super chat that I want to get to really quickly before we get out of here. Scott, we got one right here, $55.55. Congrats on 5 years, DD. Appreciate you. EVDs17. Thank you very much. 5 years and just really, really feeling like we've got it going now. And I'm so excited to see where the next 5 go. Doing this alongside you, Scott, now, and the team behind the scenes. Jay Rich enjoying his vacation, but all the wonderful people that do things to help this grow and this amazing community. Thank y'all, man. We had over 2,000 people, 2,200 people across all platforms checking us out, having this conversation tonight. It's the beginning of the month, so I know everybody in this damn place got paid. If you want more conversations like this and some all damn night, join the Heisman tier. I'm telling you, join it. First of the month, join the Heisman tier. This is the shit that we do 24/7, 365. There's a bunch of Heisman tier members in here now. This is a weekly, nightly thing in that group. So I appreciate all the love and support. Scott, you got anything you want to say? This was a good episode. I really enjoyed this tonight, man. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of undersold the Heisman. I mean, if you have a desk job where the random Tuesday afternoon at 2:00 p.m. you're just sitting there on your computer and you want to hear this kind of stuff, join Heisman. If you're up at 1 a.m. and you want to hear this kind of stuff sometimes, join Heisman. Like it's organic. That was what we wanted to make this show, was just get on here, talk about some ideas, spitball them, see where they go, just kind of get our brains to come together and talk Dynasty. And that's what Heisman is. That's what the chat is. It's literally, we don't even schedule it. Oh, hey, Scott's in there, Ray jumps in. Oh, hey, Ray's in there, Scott jumps in. And then all of a sudden we just get going on, sometimes it's not even football related. It's just sports related. We're not getting into other stuff. It's usually sports, but it's football or sports. And it's a lot of just, I've walked away from some of our conversations talking about college athletes or basketball or soccer. And we're going like, okay, that actually makes me think about something for what we do. So it's really just training your brain. It's all the way back to the game theory and the psychology. That's why we're here. So we're here for the fantasy, but really you can develop a lot of other parts of your mind. So thank you for doing this with me. Thank you, everybody that was in here in the chat and participated. Love y'all.
Make sure y'all wake y'all asses up in the morning. I'm going solo. No Jay Rich, but we're going to talk and have some fun. And then check out Destination Dynasty. Drops 6 a.m. War, wide receiver market. Scott Connor giving y'all damn near an hour on the pod. Appreciate y'all. Love y'all. We out. See you in the morning.